The story starts in 1934 in Bangalore, India, with a 5-year-old girl named Shakuntala Devi. She appeared to be engrossed in play, as if she were a child her own age, with her cousin accompanying her while doing his school math homework. But, unbeknownst to him, Shakuntala noticed the math problems and, to his surprise, she was able to solve them correctly in her head, despite the fact that they involved the cube root of an 8-digit number. Shakuntala's cousin, realizing she was no ordinary child, brought her to her parents and enthusiastically explained her genius to them. How could she not? She is only 5 years old and has never attended school, but she is capable of solving complex mathematical problems, and she did it mentally. After witnessing Shakuntala's talent firsthand, her father, Bisha, decided to take her to schools, where she demonstrated her abilities in front of teachers and students. He uses her talent to create a math show in which Shakuntala solves complex problems for the teachers, and every show is always a success. The audience gave Shakuntala a standing ovation, while Bisha received the money. Shakuntala, on the other hand, had the desire to attend school after seeing other children studying and playing together at school, and she expressed her desire to her father. Unfortunately, Bisha refuses to enroll her in school, claiming that she is intelligent enough without going to school. Shakuntala's mother asked her to study one afternoon because she had math shows in 10 different places the following week. Shakuntala, on the other hand, began to rebel at this point. Her mother is irritated because she refuses to study. She even threatened Bisha with repercussions if Shakuntala continued to refuse to study. But Shakuntala still refused, claiming that she should be the father in their home because, after all, she was the one who worked, not Bisha. Her mother only replied that Shakuntala would understand how difficult it would be to raise a child in the future. She then entered the house without telling her to study again. Sharada, Shakuntala's older sister, just stood there watching Shakuntala and their mother argue. When their mother left, she told Shakuntala that she was impressed by her intelligence. She even imagined Shakuntala becoming a great person one day. Shakuntala had hoped for this to happen. She promises Sharada that if she is truly successful in the future, she will take her anywhere she wants. But that would never happen because, when Shakuntala returned home from her show one night, she discovered Sharada dead in front of the house. Sharada had been ill for a long time, but her family could not afford to take her to the hospital. Shakuntala's money could only cover the family's daily expenses. Shakuntala, on the other hand, was too angry to remember. She holds her parents responsible for Sharada's death, particularly her mother, who did nothing to save Sharada. A mother, according to Shakuntala, should do anything for her child. Shakuntala was disappointed and refused to speak to her mother again. She despised her so much that she swore to Sharada that she would never become a woman like their mother. Bisha was still unemployed in 1954 when Shakuntala was 25 years old and relied solely on the income Shakuntala earned from doing math shows. But as she gets older, she gets better at doing her shows. Dheeraj, Shakuntala's boyfriend, refuses to propose to her. He was always making excuses to avoid proposing to her, and she never questioned his reasoning. Shakuntala discovers Dheeraj's wedding invitation to another woman one night. He has a future wife, and he has only pretended to love Shakuntala all this time. When she found out, she was furious, so she shot him with an air gun. Therefore, Shakuntala went to London at the age of 26 to forget about Dheeraj and later lived in a guest house. She still offered to do math shows for some important people because she needed money to pay her rent and other daily expenses. However, she is having difficulty finding people who want to use her services. Shakuntala eventually found the right venue for her show, the Royal Mathematical Society in London. As a result, she solved complex problems in front of the intellectuals in attendance. What impressed them even more was how quickly she accomplished it. Javier, a mathematician from Spain, was among those who were astounded by her. He even approached Shakuntala and invited her to get to know him. It didn't take long after that for the two to start dating. To summarize, Shakuntala's relationship with Javier was beneficial. He assists her in improving her English skills and is shown in schools to London officials, and she was always successful in any math show she did. She can make a lot of money from her shows, which makes her landlady proud. But Shakuntala's smile vanished when she received a letter from her parents asking her to send them money for their living expenses in India. She was clearly enraged just by reading the letter. Her parents, she felt, treated her like a bank and had done so since the beginning. They didn't even inquire about her health in the letter, and all they care about is money. Nonetheless, she responded to the letter and promised to send them money on a monthly basis. Shakuntala is one day invited to appear on a television show where she will compete against the fastest computer to solve math problems. She could easily solve the problems at first, until she came across a question that she suspected contained an error in the last 3 digits. However, the host ignored her protest, leaving her unable to resolve the issue until time ran out. He even stated that someone from the land of elephants and snakes could not possibly be the next Einstein. Even when Shakuntala tried to revise the problematic question, he refused, much to her embarrassment. After all, the event was broadcast live across the country. Javier came to see Shakuntala the next day with good news. The experts manually calculated yesterday's math problem and discovered that she was correct. The computer had made an error. Shakuntala is now known as a human computer as a result of this. Shakuntala has become increasingly interested in doing math shows since then. She was invited to perform in other countries, which increased her fame and wealth. However, as a result of Shakuntala's success, Javier feels inferior, so he ended their relationship, arguing that he should return to Spain. Shakuntala finally met a new man, Paritosh Banerjee, in 1968 in Bombay, India, and they quickly fell in love. As they planned to marry, the two traveled to Shakuntala's hometown to seek her parents' approval, but Shakuntala realized she still despised them. Her hatred for them outweighs her affection, so she refuses to get out of the car and meet them with Paritosh. As a result, in the car, Paritosh proposes to Shakuntala. They later married without informing or inviting Shakuntala's parents. Shakuntala and Paritosh were blessed with a baby girl named Anupama, or Anu for short, in 1970. Shakuntala now devotes her life to being a mother and a wife, and she is content. Shakuntala discovered a black album containing her memories of mathematics while cleaning the house one day. She realized she missed doing her shows and decided to tell Paritosh that she wanted to continue her career. Fortunately, he is a patient husband. He let her do whatever she wanted as long as she was happy. Shakuntala left the house a few days later to return to the show, leaving Anu and Paritosh at home. Shakuntala hasn't lost her touch yet. Her talent wowed many people, and she was even inducted into the Guinness Book of Records. Between shows, she always makes time to call home and tell Paritosh about her adventures. Shakuntala becomes concerned one day after Paritosh informs her that Anu has begun to learn to speak. It was because Anu said father instead of mother as her first word. Actually, it made sense because Anu was spending more time with Paritosh. Nonetheless, it made Shakuntala envious. She was also concerned that she had not been a good mother to her daughter. She was afraid Anu would forget about her. As a result, Shakuntala returned home quickly, asking Paritosh and Anu to accompany her to work and travel around the world. But, of course, Paritosh refused because he had a job in India. Furthermore, relying on his wife for money would jeopardize his pride. They eventually divorced, and Shakuntala took Anu with her to travel around the world doing math shows. Much to Paritosh's chagrin, Anu was 8 years old in 1978, and she longed for her father. She'd never see her father again because Shakuntala took her all over the world. She could only write Paritosh letters and ask her mother to send them. Shakuntala, on the other hand, who has now become astrological alongside a mathematician, realizes that Anu misses Paritosh. Still, she couldn't let Anu live with her father because she loved her and wanted her to be by her side at all times. Anu, on the other hand, didn't just want to meet her father, she wishes to attend school with other children her age. She has only been able to do homeschooling so far because of Shakuntala, who always takes her around the world. But she was sick of it. She wants to be a normal kid who goes to a normal school, and her wish coincided with Paritosh's. When Paritosh finally meets Shakuntala, he demands that she immediately send Anu to school. Otherwise, he planned to file a custody case, which he was confident he would win. In 1986, a young man Anu was finally able to attend a boarding school, where she made many friends. Nonetheless, Shakuntala remained the same. She always invites Anu to accompany her on her global travels whenever she has the opportunity. Anu rarely enjoys herself when she attends her mother's events. Anu looked bored even when Shakuntala was holding a question and answer session about her book with a homosexual theme. Her boredom quickly turns to rage when her mother accuses Paritosh of being gay. Anu had reached the end of her patience at this point. She slammed Shakuntala not only because her mother slandered her father, but also because she built her career at Anu's expense. Anu was sick of moving from hotel to hotel because her mother insisted on her accompanying her. She never felt she had a place to call home, and she certainly never felt she had a mother. So, if Shakuntala had no intention of being a normal mother, Anu threatened her with fleeing to live with her father. Shakuntala responds by telling her that Paritosh does not want Anu to live with him. She did, however, promise to take some time off and live with her in London. Shakuntala surprised Anu with a house in the heart of London in 1987, much to Anu's delight. She promised to spend time with Anu once a week, and Anu is free to invite Paritosh to her new home whenever she pleases. Shakuntala didn't make empty promises. She now spends more time with Anu, doing things like cycling and cooking together, allowing her daughter to enjoy life more than ever before. She even assisted Anu in starting her real estate business. However, their relationship soured once more in 1997. Anu, then 27, met Ajay Kumar, a businessman who would become her future husband at the time. And, of course, it didn't take long for them to fall in love. When Ajay proposes to Anu and the two families agree on a wedding date, he has a disagreement with Shakuntala. Shakuntala wishes for Ajay and Anu to remain in London after their marriage so that Anu can accompany her whenever she travels around the world. However, Ajay could not agree with Shakuntala's expectations. He has a life in Bengaluru, India, and he wants Anu to join him there. Because they were both adamant, their debate ended without a resolution. Ajay believes Anu should accompany him because he is her husband, whereas Shakuntala believes she has more authority over Anu's life because she gave birth to her. Their squabbles eventually reached Anu, who was enraged at her mother. She accuses Shakuntala of impeding her ability to live her own life. Even if Shakuntala gave birth to Anu, she should not feel she has the right to control her life, especially now that Anu is an adult. Shakuntala was furious at Anu's words and almost slapped her daughter, making Anu even more disappointed in her. Finally, Anu decides to marry Ajay without Shakuntala's permission. Not wanting Anu to leave her, Shakuntala finally took the last resort. She threatened to close Anu's property business in London and freeze all of her savings. Instead of succumbing to her threat, Anu retaliated by claiming that Shakuntala had separated her from her father. Anu would not allow her mother to separate her from her husband, so be it if Shakuntala wants to destroy her company. In India, she can start her business from scratch. Anu married Ajay a few days later, and the couple moved to India, but her hatred for Shakuntala remains. Anu became enraged when someone mentioned Shakuntala in front of her. Not only that, but she also plans to avoid having children in order to avoid repeating Shakuntala's mistakes. But fate had other plans. Anu eventually became pregnant. Fortunately, she eventually came to terms with it. She even realized that having children brought her joy. All she had to do was try not to be like Shakuntala's mother. Shakuntala, on the other hand, was unable to concentrate following her altercation with her daughter. She even made a mistake during a live television broadcast on one occasion. It made her realize she needed to go to her parents' house and apologize. But, when Shakuntala arrived, she discovered that her parents had died and the house she had lived in as a child was nearly empty. There are news clippings about her success as a mathematician among the remaining items, indicating that her parents have followed her progress since her departure from home. Shakuntala sobs when she realizes she has wronged her parents. Meanwhile, Anu has given birth to her child, Amrita, and is running her property business successfully. Anu runs into some old school friends one day, and their conversation somehow leads to the affection between mothers and children. The conversation reminded her of Amrita, whom she had left at home. As a result, she hurried back to the house to accompany her daughter. Later that night, Anu and Ajay have a serious discussion about Shakuntala. She claims to have forgiven her mother and even expresses regret for ignoring her calls for the past few years. She intends to call Shakuntala soon to tell her about Amrita. Her desire to reconcile with Shakuntala is dashed when Ajay informs her that Shakuntala has sold all of Anu's property holdings. As if that wasn't enough, she didn't even give Anu a penny of the profit sharing. Instead, she transferred the payment of the capital gains tax to Anu, putting her family in debt. Anu and Ajay would never allow Shakuntala to do this to them, so they decided to travel to London and file a lawsuit against Shakuntala. After all, Ajay was confident that they would win their case. But, when Anu and Ajay arrived in London, they discovered it was all a Shakuntala ruse. She was forced to do all of this because she wished to meet Anu, who refused to travel to London to see her. She will even give Anu all of the profits from the sale of her properties and will not mind if Anu sues her. Shakuntala does not want Anu to be like her, who has spent her entire life hating her parents. She wants Anu to truly forgive her for everything she has done to her. Anu was taken aback when she heard all of this. She needed time to think about everything, so she asked everyone to leave her alone. While alone, Anu discovered the black album she had always despised. When she opened it, she discovered that it only contained photos of Anu and Shakuntala from their time traveling around the world. She then calls Ajay and tells him excitedly about the photos. Shakuntala, on the other hand, noticed Anu's enthusiasm. Anu finally forgave her mother and apologized to Shakuntala for ignoring her for the past few years at this point. Finally, the mother and daughter hugged, relishing their reunion after so many years apart. At the end of the film, Anu, Ajay, and Amrita are seen attending Shakuntala's performance, whose math skills have improved again since she made peace with her daughter. She was even named the world's first human computer, making Anu proud to have such a mother.